All right, so I'm gonna do a little video on sharpening my Cold Steel 4max Scout. I've used it quite a bit. It's not dull to the point where it's not usable, but I definitely want to put my edge on it. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Edge Pro Apex on it. I mean, you can see it's still pretty reasonably sharp. So, but we're gonna improve on that, and we're gonna put about an 18-degree edge on it. Is what I'm gonna try to do. So this steel here is AUS 10A, which is it's a middle of the road steel by today's standards. It's not a low end steel by any stretch. It actually so far has impressed me quite a bit. I've been happy with the performance of it. I've cut up quite a bit of abrasive stuff like cardboard and different things with it, so it's been used enough that I can get a pretty good idea as far as how well it will work. I'm trying to get my darn screwdriver bit out of my bit case here and I can't get it, but yeah, it's been good. It's definitely better than I expected it to be. So this is a pretty fine slot on this flathead screwdriver bit. So I have a 3.5 is what it's saying here on this. So I don't know how easy this is gonna be to take out, but you guys are gonna see on video here. Oh no, that's not gonna go. I might need a better screwdriver to get this. Oh yeah, that's really in there. Okay, I'm gonna get a better screwdriver. Okay, I'm gonna do something that I definitely don't recommend doing, but I've tried to get this thumb stud off the easy way and I have not had any luck. Oh. As you can tell, I have a torch going. Now this is definitely not smart, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Just a little bit of heat. I'm gonna laugh at the comments I'm gonna get. This will not take the temper out of it. Certainly not out of the edge. Just need a little bit of heat to break the Loctite that they've got going on there. I can smell some melted plastic. All right, well. I mean, I can touch it, it's not hot, but I cannot get this thumb stud out. Probably, oh, now it's loose. See, that's all it takes sometimes. A little bit hot on the thumb or the finger there, but silly as it may seem, if you're really careful with heat, you can use it for a lot of stuff you might not otherwise think you can. And as dangerous as it could be, it's also easier on the slot than just torquing on it. I don't understand why this is not coming off, but I'm not going to be impressed if it doesn't unthread. I've got it pinned on the backside with my finger so I can feel it rotating or not rotating. A little bit more heat, not much. Yes, that's not gas there, so just gonna be ever so slightly. Okay, that's more than enough heat for my liking. So instead of burning my finger, which I'm probably not going to, I'm gonna try and just do it like this. I may end up having to get a pair of pliers on there, which is what I'm going to do next. So I take a little bit of cardboard and fold that over, and hopefully pinch the thumb stud without marring it up. Probably not going to work very easily. Might have to go at this not too sure yet how I'm going to do this in a way that's safe. Okay, up here I've got a bit of a bite there to it, so tell you that was a heck of a lot harder to get off compared to my regular 4max here, which I took out for the first time the other day, and it's a T6 bit on it, so it actually came apart really nicely, which actually surprised me. I was expecting it to be more like this one, but let's see what we got going on here. Get this on camera. A little bit of grease. So that's out of the way. That makes life a little easier. I'm going to, this had red, where is it here? If I can get it in focus. So it had red Loctite on it, which is why it was so difficult to get apart. Whereas my regular 4max didn't seem to have any Loctite. And you can see there's no damage to the backside of the thumb stud. That's not from trying to do anything, I don't know, it's just gunk in it. So we're going to put that over in the lid of my screwdriver kit. Move that out of the way. So now that is ready to get set up on my Edge Pro. Alright, so I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen other videos where people use Edge Pros to sharpen knives. There's some basic sort of things that you often see people recommend, you know, as far as setting up the Edge Pro. One of the things would be to mark the edge. So I'm going to do that with a permanent marker. I'm just cleaning it off so that it actually sticks. There's no oil on it. So I'll get that out of the way. Got my Jiffy marker. I'm going to do it on this side here. And then I'm going to do it up on the belly of the blade. And the reason why is this knife, I can see, is going to be a little bit challenging to set on here. So when I pull away, the blade's going to have a real tendency to want to rock. on the base of the Edge Pro. So what I'm going to do is that as I'm sharpening, I'm going to start bringing the tip out, like rotating like this, so that it sort of stays in line with the same, well, stays, as I'm sharpening, I'm going to try and rotate it out like this so that the edge is at the same distance away as this was when I was sharpening, just to try and keep things even. It's probably the safest and least, well, it's the safest way to sharpen it without having inconsistencies. My stones here, put them off to the side. Going to set the Edge Pro, or the knife on the Edge Pro here, and get my blade height set so that the edge is not too far past the edge of the table. It's not a big deal where you set this so much when you're doing it like this, because we're going off of the factory edge, right? So we're not working off the gradients on the Edge Pro as far as the angles and stuff are concerned. So I'll find a, say, 4,000 grit stone, put that in the stone holder. Now these are sharpened glass stones, so they're splash and go. You can use whatever. I use a little bit of cleaning stuff that I use on my kitchen counters. It's a spray cleaner, nothing fancy. So I'm going to do a couple of passes just to see how close it is to, oh, I can see there we need to reduce the angle a lot. You can hopefully kind of see where the felt marker's coming off there. So lower this down a little bit, if I can get that loose. Being a little sticky. Okay, let's just see where that is. Now, let's see, that is a little better. Maybe needs to come up just a little bit. Not much. Might be a little too high, so I'll chase that down just a little bit more. There we go. Try that. That feels better. You know what? I'm going to go to a little more aggressive stone than that, just because I'm having a hard time seeing it. Okay, so too steep. Seems to be better. Might be a little higher than the factory edge, but it's sufficient. Like, it's close enough. We're going to be redoing and resetting the edge anyways, so, and establishing our own angle. So the other thing we can do here is we can get an idea of what the actual factory angle is based on that. So I've got an angle cube here. So make sure, oh, that's a little too much. We'll zero that so that it's measuring. And then we will put this down. Get that on there. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show you. Oh, hold on, maybe I can't. It's 22 degrees exactly. So this is a 22-degree edge. I think that's a little bit too steep. I'd rather see a 20-degree edge with this particular knife and this steel. It's not like it's going to make that much of a difference, but I mean, it is a reasonably tough steel, right? So I think you can get away with a little bit less of a steep edge. But for right now, we're just going to go with the factory edge geometry, which is what appears to be 22 degrees, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I've got a little stop collar on the back of the Edge Pro, so the rod that you make your adjustments on, and that little collar, you stick your stone in it. So you take, and then you can make adjustments to the height based on the different thicknesses of the stone. So I don't know if I can show you that on the video here without totally changing everything, but I'm gonna probably just leave it alone. There's other videos on the internet where you can actually look at that a little better. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I can lift this right up without dropping everything. So there's the collar. So I've got to drop that collar and then put the stone in there. Okay, so take that 1K stone, that's our established stone, or the stone we're using to establish the other ones from. I hope this is showing up. So we tighten that up, we've pushed it up to the base here. That's a drill collar, so that's all it is. This should tighten down a little better. I don't want it to raise up on me. Once I get everything squared up. So that's set for that 1K stone. I think, given that we're not changing the edge geometry too drastically, we're simply going to go to the 500 grit stone. We're not going to go right down to the 1000. So that's a little bit thinner. Maybe get this on camera like this. You can see there's a little bit of play. So So what we want to do is loosen that height adjustment and then drop that down so that the stone is pinched tightly between the drill collar and the adjustment bracket on here. We'll tighten that back up, and that will keep our geometry, like the edge angle, consistent. Get that in there nice on the stone holder. Wet that down. Now this is a pretty easy system to use, but when you're sharpening knives like this, it's a little more difficult. So you really want to make sure you're holding that blade flat so that you're not getting any rocking. Grab some paper towel. Clean the edge off. You can see that that's disappearing nicely. We got a long ways to go before we actually get down to the edge. I can see that we've actually steepened. Well, not steepened, but decreased that secondary bevel on the edge, or on the knife there a little bit. I don't know if it's catching in the light at all. So we're gonna have to remove a little bit more material in order to get a burr. So it's gonna take a bit. So what I'll do is I'll go through and all the progressions of the stones up to my 8,000 grit, and then go from there. Maybe worth going down to the 3,000, or sorry, the 320 grit, depending on how long it takes to cut, but so far it's actually cutting quite quickly. Not bad at all. So that's that. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to finish up with this one, and then once we get to the point where we've got a burr, we're going to flip over to the other side and do the same thing. So I've actually decided I'm going to sharpen it at a 20-degree angle. I feel a little better about spending all this time and actually having it at an angle I'm a little happier with. So that's what I'm doing. And yeah, and I went down to the 320 grit stone as well. So one of the things when using this Edge Pro 2 is trying to find like a happy medium. Like if you've got a blade like this that you can't move that way when you're getting towards the tip when you're sharpening it, sometimes it's better just to have that tip angled up just a little bit, right? And then just leave it there. That way at least you're consistent. Because it can be a real pain. I mean, this isn't the be-all and end-all sharpener out there. I mean, it's a good sharpener. It has some real advantages and it works really well on some knives, but then there's other ones that it doesn't work as well on. I'd like to get a KME one of these days. Maybe down the road, I'm not too sure. Problem is that you make those little changes, subtle as they are, you end up with an edge that's not sharpening consistently. I'm going to try something here. I have no idea whether it will work, but might be kind of interesting if it does. I'm going to use the thumb stud hole like this, and then I'm going to secure it down there. Well, it actually kind of worked. I've never done that before, so now I can actually see what the heck I'm doing here, try and sort of stay consistent, and yeah, I like it. I'll give that a go. That's definitely a little less fatiguing on the finger, and I don't have to hold the blade down. I can focus on using really light pressure on here. This is actually working really well. I can actually see the edges I'm working up to the tip here. Well, that was an idea I had I didn't think was actually going to work. But it's working actually really well. I'm going to use that on more knives because I've got some other ones that are really challenging to sharpen on this thing. Actually, my zero tolerance, the 0561, is a real pain. Oh, there's my dog, whining away. You having a good scratch there, eh? You're not going to knock down anything this time, are you? He's a big meathead. Yeah, that's working pretty good. Well, I just learned a new trick today. Now, doing the sharpening in a single spot like that can be dangerous. You end up getting, you know, like an obvious change in the belly of the blade. But I'm able to see the factory grind lines right here. I'm not sure if that's showing up in the camera, but I'm chasing that out to the tip. So I know I'm not overdoing it. It's definitely not the fastest way to sharpen. It's a lot quicker to do it on a water stone, which I normally do with a lot of my knives. I just wanted to try it on this one, basically so that I know how it works for my 4-max, the regular one, because that's a, you know, definitely a more valuable knife that I don't really want to screw up. I definitely feel more comfortable doing it on a bench stone, like a water stone that I've got. It's almost there. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a spot right at the tip there that still working on. I can't really get it to show up very well on the camera. Oh yeah, there you can sort of see it. So that's what's going on right now. All right, I'm still working on the tip here with a 320 grit stone. It's taken quite a bit. I can tell you that this stuff, it's got, you know, it's got a decent amount of wear resistance. It's not, you know, like ZDP 189 or something like that, or M390, but it's not bad. Like, it still takes a bit of effort to cut. The stones are cutting easy compared to some steels. There's no question about that. So there's, you know, a noticeably noticeable difference as far as the wear resistance as far as sharpening compared to like M390 or CPM 20 CV. It's going to be interesting to actually see what this sharpens like in comparison to the 4max and 20 CV. That's really going to tell me, you know, how much of a difference there is as far as wear resistance goes. I mean, there is obviously quite a large difference, but in practical terms, I mean, they're probably not as much as you would think. I mean, I do notice it a little bit with the amount of cutting that I've done with this one, the 4max Scout, over the regular 4max, that the AUS 10A, although it holds a really good edge, it's not quite as good as 20 CV. I've actually been really impressed with the steel though. Like I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is. It's no slouch, there's no question about it. And that is another reason I wanted to sharpen this knife, is I wanted to see how well it sharpened, how hard it was. And I mean, you can tell that this is not as hard as some steels, just the way the stone glides across. You can feel it cutting without much pressure. S110V is not a nice one. Almost skates on it, but not quite. So instead of having a hour-long video sharpening, I'm just gonna stop the video and come back to it a little later on as I get further on in the progression here. Yeah, it's getting really close. There's about that much there I've got to continue working. That screw through the thumb stud hole is working really well. I'm going to be using that on other knives. There's no question about it if I can do it. It actually really works well. There's some other sharpeners that have come out just recently. I think Worksharp has a guided system like this that looks pretty good. Maybe a little more user-friendly than the Edge Pro. But the Edge Pro is a really good system. It does take a bit of practice with, just like anything, I guess, right? Nothing's foolproof. But the fact that you've got to hold the knife to the table, that makes it a little more susceptible to user error compared to a sharpening system where you clamp the knife in. But it also offers you more flexibility for kitchen knives and stuff like that. So, but for the smaller knives, it's probably more advantageous to use a sharpening system that actually secures the knife, like what I'm doing here. I'll get a little more water on here. So after I remove that part of the edge there that hasn't been sharpened away, I'll go through and I'll do a couple passes on the rest of it just so that everything's blended nicely. Getting there. This steel does take quite a bit of work to sharpen. It's not 420 stainless, that's for darn sure. And it's not AUS 8A or whatnot. There's huge difference. I think it's a totally different animal. This is more like 440C in terms of how it sharpens, or VG10 probably would even be more similar. I don't have a lot of VG10 knives. I've had a few over the years. I've got some kitchen knives, and I think, now that I think about it, this sharpens quite similar to those. And it's getting there, but wow, it's taking a bit. take too much off here, the grinds are going to be uneven compared to the other side. That's why I don't want to get too carried away. I also don't want to flip over until I'm totally done. And it's just about done, not quite. Well, I'm almost to the point where I've ground out. It looks like maybe somebody slipped in the grinding process, like when they originally put the edge on this. It's just, there's so much material I've had to take off that tip there. And the bevel's gotten wider too, because it's a little bit less of an angle than 20 degrees as it comes up to the point there, because it's dropping below the edge of the table a bit. But that's fine for what I'm doing. I don't mind that. I'm just looking here. It's pretty much done now. So I will go through and work from the heel of the blade here all the way through before I flip it over and do it on the other side. I think that's pretty good. Yep. Well, I did the same thing and put that screw through the thumb stud hole there and fastened it to the table of the edge pro, and it's working just unbelievably well. So I'm gonna work on this side here and get the burr back over, just because it takes so much material off the other side. Okay, so I finished with the 320 grit back on this side, and now I'm going up to the 500 grit, and that won't take as long. Once you start getting up to the 1000 and above, so the 4000 grit and the 8000 grit especially, it takes a long time to work through and get rid of all those scratch patterns from the coarser stones. But I mean, if you wanted to stop at 1000 grit, you'd have a really aggressive working edge that would last a long time. But with OS 10, it's a relatively low alloy stainless steel, so it's not got a whole lot of carbides in there like S30V does, for instance. So it would do well with a highly polished edge. Whereas S30V does not. It likes a toothy edge. So now, because we've worked through and we're cutting evenly along that whole edge bevel, it actually goes pretty quick. And it looks like I'm sharpening in both directions, and I kind of am, but I'm not putting any real weight on the backstroke. I'm not really putting any real weight on the forward stroke either, but you know, definitely a little bit. Well, that was start to finish, the 500 grit. We'll move over to the 1000 grit now. Clean that up a little bit. You see all the swarf. I typically will take my stones afterwards, throw them in some soapy water and scrub them down with a Scotch-Brite pad and clean them all up. It's time to flip over to the other side. Okay, so we've moved up to the 1000 grit. we're halfway done as far as the stones are concerned, but not quite halfway done as far as the time it takes. I don't know, maybe thereabouts. Like I said, these higher grit stones take a longer time to work through. 1,000 isn't bad though. But you still have to spend a bit of time, otherwise when you do get up to those 4,000 grit stones and above, they don't you don't get the same results as if you spend enough time with the lower grit stones removing those scratch patterns. So that, like, once you remove those scratch patterns and you go up to the higher grit stone, it just makes it easier for that higher grit stone to work through. It doesn't have to remove as much material to establish its own scratch patterns based on its grit. Yeah, this stuff cuts nice. Like, it really does seem to work pretty well. Thing I'm doing also is I'm putting a little felt marker there, just as I move it back from side to side, that I'm making sure I'm keeping that angle consistent out at the tip, because it has a potential to change depending on, you know, the orientation of the blade if you angle it back handle wise and stuff. So trying to keep it consistent, and also using this little point as a reference when I fix it back onto the table here. All right, so I've worked now my way up to the 4,000 grit stone. And I can already see that edge just after that little quick progression with this, like just from the time I changed to the stone to right now, I can already see that edge starting to polish up. Like that was pretty quick. I'm actually surprised, to be honest. I can see that it's removing material. There's some swarf coming off in the liquid, and now I can actually feel the knife edge and the stone chattering a little bit, so it must be getting dry. It's interesting how different steels behave though on the sharpening stones. Like, they're not all equal. There's no question. You can tell the difference between one steel and another steel when you sharpen it. If you sharpen enough knives, you can really tell. There's some steels you may not be able to tell the difference between, that are very similar in nature, but you can certainly tell an AUS 10 steel from a M390 or or an S110V. You can tell that steel from pretty much anything. It's horrific to sharpen. Even with one of these, it takes a long time. I tell you though, that screw through the thumb stud hole, that is a good trick. I never even thought about doing that before. This is the first time. And I found out about it on camera. So it's kind of a learning experience and whatnot, but I can tell you right now, if you have the opportunity to do that and you've got an Edge Pro, it's worth it. It's my wrists and hand would cramp up, you know, by the time I'm done sharpening a large knife like this, especially if you're reprofiling something. It takes a long time. So that's a really forgiving trick. And also just keeping everything super consistent. These sharpened glass stones are really nice though. I wish I had actual bench stones I've got, oh, I can't remember what the heck they are. They're a similar stone in the sense that they're like a ceramic bonded water stone. They are, oh, I don't know where I got them hiding away here somewhere. But they were something that was from Lee Valley. Actually, my dad bought, and I kind of snagged from him. Looks pretty good. So we're gonna flip over to the other side now. All right, 4,000 grit on the other side now. All right, now we are at the final stage, 8,000 grit stone. So this definitely does take a little more time. I usually spend about 10 minutes aside on this 8,000 grit, depending on how fast it cuts the steel, right? Have a feeling that this one will cut fairly quickly. I can already see it starting to polish up. And I can see some swarf on the blade down here, so that tells me that it's cutting nicely. The other thing too, I mean, what I'm doing here with this 4max Scout would be exactly the same with the regular 4max, considering it's pretty much identical as far as the dimensions and everything. When it comes to this, it would be essentially exactly the same. Oh, it's gonna be sharp, I can tell you that much. Like you could literally shave the hairs off of an ad's nuts once you've progressed to 8,000 grit and worked through and have been really consistent with how you do that. No, this is cutting really quick. Yeah, it's cutting nicely actually. On the harder steels, you can feel that stone just sort of glass over. It doesn't cut like that. Like 20 CV would be very slow to cut compared to this. Next knife I'm going to sharpen actually would be my Spyderco Paramilitary 2 in M390, and that will be definitely a little more challenging in comparison to this, as far as the time it takes to cut that steel. Normally I do this on countertop or on my kitchen stove has a glass top so that I can use a little suction cup feet at the back, and it holds everything in place nicely. Yeah, no, this 8,000 grit stone is biting into the steel more so than what I would have expected, actually, which is good. It means we're gonna end up with an extremely sharp knife with a high quality edge, just the way it's cutting. I'm pretty happy with that. Sounds like my kids are having fun upstairs. I can hear them hooting and hollering. All right, well, I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna switch over to the other side and finish things up. All right, we are almost finished. Oops. Hold it. Once I'm done here, I will flip it over and just do one quick pass like this, pretty much, just to make sure there's no burrs. I don't find with this Edge Pro, when you work your way all the way to this 8,000 stone, it leaves you with any kind of burr that you've got to remove. Not much, if any at all. So I think I'm happy with that. So flip it over, do a quick pass, and that's about it. Then check sharpness. Okay, so this is the final little pass on the other side, just to, if there's any burr there, if there's anything that I feel. After this, I'll just take a quick pass on my strop. And that should be good. Well, I can tell you right now, it is sharp. The bevel's a little wider on this side than this side, just because I had to remove more material. It's not much, but I'm gonna grab some paper and give it a little edge test. Okay, so here's some paper that comes in knife boxes. It's a little crumpled, so it might not work that well, but yeah, I'll just show you here. Like, it is sharp. Trying to get a piece here where it actually will cut, so it's crumpled so bad. Tell you one thing, it wasn't this sharp from the factory. So lift fingerprints, like no word of a lie. Like, it's just wicked, wicked sharp. So there you have it. And if you like these videos, yeah, definitely subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Really appreciate it. Helps the channel grow and helps me make more videos.